AITA for not going above and beyond to make sure my kids see their half-sister and not even making sure they get to see her at Christmas. I am 30 years old and have 2 kids, an 11-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son, with my ex, Charlotte, who is also 30 years old. I have full physical and legal custody of them, and to be honest, I'm exhausted. We had the kids young, and like many young parents, we struggled. But Charlotte struggled worse, and before too long, she regretted having them. It was only a month after our son was born that she openly admitted she wished she hadn't had kids. The regret didn't just stop at our son, she'd look at our daughter the same way. It got to the point where she asked for time to find herself after our son was born, and honestly, it was a relief for me. But when she got that break, she didn't want to come back. I ended up getting primary custody right from the start. Charlotte had a generous visitation schedule, 3 weeks a month, plus 4 dinners during the week, specifically on Wednesdays. But she rarely followed through. For a while, she'd show up for 1 weekend a month, but there were times she'd go months without seeing them. The judge wasn't willing to adjust the schedule, even though Charlotte admitted she didn't want to take the time. All the while, I made sure her family could see the kids when they wanted to, and we got along well enough, so I had no issue with that. Things took a turn, though, when Charlotte met Rob. He wanted to be a dad to my kids. From day one, he pushed for more custody, and they filed for it the moment they got married, thinking that the marriage itself would suddenly make a difference. Rob started telling me the kids were calling him Dad now, but when I asked the kids, they'd tell me they didn't. He would accuse me of being the one stopping them from calling him that, even though they'd recoil when he'd try to hug them or reach for them. They didn't want him pushing them around. I asked the kids if he had ever hurt them, and they said no, but they just didn't like how he always tried to force them to stand next to him or walk with him. I documented everything and spoke to my lawyer. Things got worse. There was this one incident where Rob scolded the kids for calling him by his name in front of me. He also tried to stop them from hugging me, telling them that it was their time and they didn't need to be near me. This happened at an extracurricular event, and I recorded it. When the custody evaluation came around, I presented all the evidence. The judge appointed a guardian ad litem to investigate, and by the time the evaluation ended, I had full physical and legal custody. Rob, on the other hand, was done. He went from saying, "They're mine, screw off," to, "Just take them, I don't care." Charlotte seemed relieved too, as the kids were back with me all the time. Not long after the custody decision, I found out Charlotte was pregnant again. 10 months later, Charlotte and Rob had a daughter. My kids have seen her 3 times since she was born, and now she's 4 years old. Charlotte has no contact with my kids anymore. The only connection left is through her family, who still see the kids. Lately, though, Charlotte's family has started to make their displeasure known. They've been saying I don't facilitate a relationship between my kids and their half-sister. According to them, I should be going out of my way to make sure they grow up loving each other. And they claim my kids don't talk about her, which they somehow blame on me. They've even told me that I'm preventing them from having a bond with her. Now, they've decided that they'll host Christmas for the entire family and expect me to send my kids to them on Christmas Day so they can be with their half-sister. I told them no. I can't send my kids away to a family gathering where they'll be ignored by their mother and forced to spend time with a 4-year-old who barely knows them. Charlotte's parents didn't like my response. They accused me of being a petty father who only cares about his own bloodline and not valuing the relationship between half-siblings, despite the fact that the half isn't even my half. They told me I should do what's best for the kids, not for myself. Now, I'm left wondering, am I the asshole for not sending my kids to Charlotte's family for Christmas? I just want them to have a normal holiday. And I don't think forcing them to spend time in a family dynamic that feels forced is the right thing to do. But maybe I'm missing something. What do you think?
Update 1!
3 days after the post. After reading through the comments, I decided to sit down with my kids and have a real conversation about the situation. I wanted to know how they felt about spending time with Charlotte's family and their half-sister, especially over Christmas. I was expecting them to at least be open to the idea, given all the pressure Charlotte's family had been putting on me. But when I asked, they both said they didn't want to go. Yeah, my daughter said she didn't feel comfortable being around people she hardly knew, and my son echoed that. They haven't had much of a relationship with Charlotte's family or their half-sister, and they just didn't feel ready for that kind of forced interaction. It wasn't easy to hear, but I respected their decision. They're the ones who have to deal with these relationships, and I don't want to push them into something they're not ready for. So, I called Charlotte's family to let them know about the kids' decision. I explained that after talking with them, they had made it clear they weren't comfortable going. I also said that I respected their feelings and wouldn't force them to be part of a situation they didn't want to be in. Their response wasn't great. They didn't take it well. They tried to tell me how important it was for the kids to build a relationship with their half-sister, but I reminded them that it's hard to form those connections when the kids haven't been involved in each other's lives at all. They kept insisting that it was my responsibility to make sure the kids spent time with their half-sister, and they accused me of being unreasonable. I tried to explain that this wasn't about blocking any relationships, but that the kids need to feel comfortable. I made it clear that if they wanted to have a relationship with my kids, they had to respect their boundaries. They didn't take that well either and started pushing back, telling me I was being petty and not putting the kids' best interests first. I stuck to my point. This was about my kids feeling safe and respected. The conversation ended with a lot of tension, and it didn't seem like they understood where I was coming from. They didn't agree, and I'm sure they're still upset. But at this point, I'm not backing down. My kids are the priority here, and if Charlotte's family can't respect their feelings, then I can't force it. I'll keep them updated on how things go, but for now, that's the situation.
Update 2!
1 week after the post. First, I want to acknowledge all the support and thoughtful comments I've been receiving. It's really helped me to keep a level head and move forward through this. Honestly, I'm just trying to do what's best for my kids, and it's reassuring to see that so many of you understand that. So, here's what's happened since my last update. After a few days of radio silence, Charlotte's family reached out again. This time they proposed a short, neutral meeting between my kids and their half-sister, Charlotte's daughter. They suggested a public place, like a park or a cafe, so it wouldn't feel too forced, and they wanted it to be a low-pressure situation. I thought about it for a bit before I brought it up to my kids. I explained what Charlotte's family was offering and asked if they were willing to give it a shot. After talking about it, my kids seemed open to the idea. They were still wary about it, but they said they'd give it a try as long as it didn't turn into anything overwhelming. They understood that I wasn't pushing them into anything and that they could leave whenever they felt uncomfortable. I was cautious about this because, honestly, it could have gone either way, but I wanted to keep an open line of communication with them. If they changed their minds at any point, I'd support them fully. So, we agreed to meet up. The day of the meeting, I went with my kids to the agreed-upon location, keeping everything as low-key as possible. The atmosphere was casual, and I didn't want it to feel like some forced family reunion or a big spectacle. Charlotte's family was there, and Charlotte's daughter, who is now 4, was there too. My kids were polite and made an effort to be civil, but they definitely kept their distance. They didn't engage much with their half-sister, and it was clear that they weren't emotionally invested in the meeting. I noticed that my daughter would give short responses, and my son would sometimes just look around or play with his phone. To be honest, I could tell they were trying, but it was awkward. Charlotte's daughter, being so young, didn't quite understand the tension, but she was happy to be there. Charlotte's family was pleased with how things were going, but they were pushing a little too hard for my kids to engage more than they were ready to. I was very clear about letting my kids set the pace, so I made sure the meeting didn't turn into something uncomfortable. At one point, Charlotte's mother tried to ask my kids if they wanted to spend more time with their half-sister in the future, but my kids just politely declined. I could tell that my kids didn't feel ready for that. They were respectful, but they weren't making an effort to bond beyond the bare minimum, and I respected that. It wasn't the time to try to force anything. Overall, the meeting lasted about an hour. Charlotte's family kept suggesting future meetups, but I could tell that my kids weren't comfortable with that yet. I didn't want to pressure them into anything, so I kept it clear that they could decide in their own time if they wanted more contact. When we left, my kids didn't seem too upset, but they were quiet. My daughter told me that it was nice to meet her half-sister, but that she didn't feel close to her yet, and my son just said it was fine, but he didn't really feel a connection. I'm still processing how I feel about everything. I'm glad they gave it a shot, but I also don't think it changed anything significant. My kids are still very much their own people, and the relationship with their half-sister hasn't really gone anywhere yet. The meeting didn't cause any harm, but it wasn't this magical moment of bonding either. Charlotte's family was optimistic after the meeting, but I'm not rushing to set up another one. I told them that we'd take it slow, and if my kids wanted to see their half-sister again, they'd let me know. I'm sticking to my boundaries and continuing to prioritize my kids' feelings. It's a small step forward, I guess, but we're not there yet. My kids are still adjusting, and I'll continue to respect their space. For now, it's just about keeping communication open and letting things happen naturally, not forcing anything. I'll keep everyone updated if anything changes, but that's where things stand right now. Update 3. 2 weeks after the post. After the first meeting with Charlotte's family, they came back and suggested more get-togethers between my kids and their half-sister. They seemed optimistic and were eager to keep things moving forward, which I get. They're hoping for some magical bonding moment. But after talking with my kids, I realized that they weren't ready for any of that. I sat down with them again and asked how they felt about more meetings with their half-sister. My daughter said she appreciated the chance to meet her, but still felt like it wasn't the right time for anything more. She said it felt awkward and that she wasn't ready to force a connection when there wasn't one. My son felt the same way. He told me he wasn't against the idea of seeing her again eventually, but he didn't want to rush into anything. They both made it clear that they needed more time to process everything, and they didn't feel comfortable being pushed into regular meetups just because Charlotte's family thought it was a good idea. So, I called Charlotte's family again and explained where we were. I told them that my kids weren't ready for more meetings yet and needed some more time to adjust. I made it clear that I wasn't trying to shut anything down permanently, but I wanted to respect my kids' boundaries. They didn't take it well. I could tell they were disappointed, and they tried to push a bit harder, asking when we could expect the next meeting. I stuck to my guns and told them it wasn't about rushing into things. It was about giving my kids space to decide when they were ready. It wasn't easy. I could hear the frustration in their voices as they tried to convince me that time was slipping away, and that my kids might regret not building a relationship now. They even said things like, "This is what's best for the kids," and "they need to learn to accept their half-sister." It's tough, because I get where they're coming from. I know they want the kids to have a relationship with their half-sister, and I don't want to completely shut that down. But at the same time, I have to prioritize my kids' feelings. I told them that if they wanted to build a relationship with the kids, it needed to be on the kids' terms, not based on a timetable that made everyone else comfortable. After a bit of back and forth, they finally said they'd respect the decision and give the kids more time. But I could tell they weren't happy with it. I think it's going to be a while before they truly understand that pushing too hard won't help anything. For now, though, I'm trying to keep the peace. The last thing I want is for this whole situation to turn into a tug of war where everyone's feelings get hurt. Charlotte's family needs to realize that the kids are not going to instantly bond just because they meet up once in a while. It takes time, and if they push too much, they risk alienating my kids further. As for my kids, they seem relieved to have this time to themselves. They've been doing better lately, and I've seen them open up more about how they feel. They still don't really talk much about their half-sister, but I can tell they're not as stressed out by it all. I think they're just happy to be in a place where they're not being forced into a situation they're not ready for. Charlotte's family hasn't been in touch much since our last conversation, and I honestly think they're waiting for us to come around. I'm not sure how long this waiting game will go on, but for now, I'm focusing on my kids and their emotional needs. I'll keep the lines of communication open, but I'm not going to force them into a situation they're not comfortable with. I'll keep you all posted if anything changes, but that's where we stand now. The kids have time to adjust, and I'm hoping Charlotte's family can respect that and give them the space they need. Update 4, 1 month after the post. First off, I want to thank everyone for the continued support. It's been a month since my last update, and I've really appreciated the kind words and advice that have helped me stay grounded throughout this whole ordeal. So, here's where we stand now. Right now, things have calmed down a bit. My kids and I are just focusing on our everyday lives, school, work, the usual stuff. We've been spending more time together as a family, just the three of us, and honestly, I think it's been good for all of us. The tension that was there a few weeks ago has settled, and we're finally getting back to some normalcy. As for the meetings with Charlotte's family, we still haven't done any more. There hasn't been any further pressure from them, which I think is a good thing. They've been quiet, and I think they've realized that pushing too hard isn't going to work. I've made it clear that I'm open to the possibility of future meetups, but only when my kids are ready. I'm not going to force them into anything. and I don't want them to feel like they're being pressured into a relationship they're not comfortable with. If they ever change their minds and feel ready to spend more time with Charlotte's side of the family, I'll be there to support them. But for now, they're content with things as they are. The kids seem more relaxed now. My daughter has been opening up a bit more about her feelings, and my son is just happy doing his own thing. They both seem to appreciate having a bit more space, and I've noticed that they're both less anxious when it comes to discussing their half-sister. I think they're coming to terms with things in their own way. They still don't talk much about Charlotte's daughter, but that's okay. I'm not forcing them to discuss it, and I'm not going to rush them into forming a bond just because everyone else thinks it should happen. It hasn't been all smooth sailing, though. The other day, my daughter mentioned something about Charlotte's family, and I could tell there was still some confusion and discomfort there. I think there's a lot of unresolved emotions on their part, and I'm trying to give them the time and space they need to process everything. It's tough because, as a parent, you want to fix everything, but I'm learning that the best thing I can do is listen and let them guide me through this. They'll come to me when they're ready to talk more about it, and I'll be there to listen. Charlotte's family has been surprisingly quiet lately. I haven't heard much from them since I last spoke to them about giving the kids time. I'm sure they're still hoping for a breakthrough, but they haven't pushed in any way that's been upsetting. I think they're coming to terms with the fact that this isn't something that can be forced. I haven't completely shut them out, but I'm also not going to bend just because they want something different for my kids. It's about respecting what my kids need, not what they think they should need. One thing that's been on my mind a lot lately is the whole concept of family. I've been thinking about what it means for my kids to have a relationship with their half-sister and whether that's something I should be prioritizing. At the end of the day, I want my kids to be happy and healthy, and I want them to have all the opportunities for love and connection that they deserve. But I also want them to feel like they have control over their relationships. They shouldn't be forced to interact with people just because it's expected. They should choose who they want to be close to, and that includes their half-sister. I've been reflecting on this a lot, and I'm really trying to balance my desire to help them form relationships with my understanding that they need to do it on their own terms. In the meantime, life is moving on. My kids are getting older, and I'm doing my best to be there for them in every way I can. We've had some great moments over the last month, simple things like movie nights and weekend trips to the park. I think we're all in a better place now than we were a month ago, and that's what matters most. I've learned that sometimes taking things slow and letting them unfold naturally is the best approach. I'll keep you all updated as things progress, but for now, that's where we are. We're in a good place, and I'm going to continue respecting my kids' boundaries while also being open to the future if and when they decide they want more contact with Charlotte's family. Thanks again to everyone who's been following along and offering support. It really means a lot.